I never meant to linger at the campus coffee shop that late. Most days, it was just where I killed time between classes, scrolling through my phone, half writing essays I'd end up deleting. The kind of place where the baristas knew everyone's name, and the old clock on the wall always ticked a little too loudly when the crowd thinned. That night, it was just me, and her. She always sat at the corner table by the window, the one where the light spilled across the floor in pale stripes. Mrs. Rowan. My old English teacher. Divorced now, though that word felt too heavy to carry around with her quiet presence. She was mid-40s, maybe, but I never thought about age first when I noticed her. It was her stillness. The way she tucked a pen behind her ear like she had nowhere else to be. I'd told myself 100 times she probably didn't even recognize me. Years had passed since high school, and people forget. But that evening, when I picked up my coffee, burnt and too sweet, she glanced up and said, almost offhand, "You still take it with 3 sugars?" My stomach dipped. Yeah, I laughed, awkward, too loud in the quiet room. Guess I never grew out of it. She smiled, and it wasn't a teacher's smile. Not that practiced, polite curve. It was smaller, like she was letting herself be amused for once. I sat 2 tables away, pretending to be absorbed in my laptop. Except my screen was black. Every so often, I'd catch her reflection in the glass, her hand curled loosely around the mug, eyes skimming words I couldn't see. She wasn't wearing a ring. Not that it mattered, not that I should even notice. Still, I did. A text buzzed on my phone. Group chat with friends. I didn't open it. I scrolled back up to a draft message I'd typed earlier, "You around? Wanna hang?" I hadn't sent it. I rarely did. My life had become a collection of unsent words, sitting in little gray bubbles. Her chair creaked, pulling me back. She leaned over slightly, holding up her mug. "They close in 10. Want the rest?" I blinked at her. "Oh, no, I'm good." My voice cracked on good. She tilted her head, studying me for a second too long. Then she set the mug back down, shaking her head like she found the whole exchange faintly ridiculous. I caught myself folding my napkin over and over, pressing the edges flat, my fingers restless. She noticed that too. I swear she did. Her gaze lingered on my hands, then flicked back to her book. Time moved differently with her in the room. Slower, heavier, but not in a bad way. More like waiting for rain you knew was coming. When she finally stood, tucking her pen into her bag, I thought that was it. Just another almost moment. She walked past me, the faint scent of coffee and paper trailing after her, and paused at the door. "Hey." Her voice was low, like she didn't want to wake the silence. I looked up. She hesitated, fingers brushing the doorframe. "You still write, don't you?" I swallowed. My mouth was dry. "Sometimes." Her eyes softened. "Don't stop." And then she left, the door shutting with the quietest click. I stared at the space she'd left behind, phone buzzing again in my pocket. But it wasn't the group chat this time. It was a new text, one I hadn't expected, from a number I hadn't seen in years. I forgot to ask, "Same coffee shop tomorrow?" I read it twice, heart stumbling, the napkin still crumpled tight in my fist. I showed up the next night earlier than usual, as if arriving before her might prove I wasn't waiting. The coffee shop hummed with its usual background, grinder whirring, chairs scraping, someone's muted laugh, but I couldn't settle. My laptop sat open again, blank screen glowing. She came in 10 minutes later, rain on her coat shoulders, hair damp in strands that stuck to her cheek. When she saw me, her smile was small, almost shy. That alone undid me. "Twice in a row," she said, slipping her bag onto the chair across from mine. "Coincidence?" I tried to play it off. "Guess we both have bad coffee habits." The barista brought her tea without being asked, chamomile, I remembered now. She stirred it absently, spoon clinking, and asked, "Still writing?" "Not really," I admitted. "I start things, but they never stick." She leaned back, considering me. "You were good at beginnings. Your essays always had the strongest first paragraphs. Then you'd rush the ending, like you were already tired of your own story." I laughed softly, embarrassed at how well she remembered. "That sounds about right." Silence stretched, but not the empty kind. Her eyes flicked to the napkin I was folding again, neat squares piling up on the table. She reached out suddenly, pressing her hand lightly against mine to stop me. Just a second of warmth, then she pulled away like she'd touched something fragile. That brief contact kept echoing in my chest. "You ever miss teaching?" I asked. Her face shifted, thoughtful. "Sometimes. Not the grading. But the feeling of a room full of people listening, like maybe you mattered for an hour." She paused. Divorce made me realize how quiet a house can be. Too quiet. I nodded, pretending to focus on my coffee, though her words pressed hard against the silence inside me. My place was the same, unread texts, a fridge with takeout containers, no one to ask if I'd eaten. It should have been simple. She was older, once my teacher, someone who probably knew better. But that didn't stop me from imagining, her hand brushing mine again, leaning closer, a conversation that never had to end. The images came uninvited, and I shoved them back down. "You know," she said, breaking the pause, "most people your age don't waste their nights in coffee shops. You're supposed to be out, living." "Maybe I like it here," I answered. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Her gaze lingered. Something unspoken passed between us, heavy and impossible to name. She gave the smallest shake of her head, smiling in a way that looked almost pained. When she left, she didn't say goodbye. Instead, as she slipped her coat on, she reached over and straightened the napkin I'd crumpled, smoothing it with her palm. A small, ordinary gesture, but I felt it like a secret. She didn't look back when she walked out, but the crease of that napkin stayed under my hand long after she was gone. The next time we met, it wasn't planned. I was at the library, half asleep over a textbook, when she appeared in the aisle, sliding a novel back onto the shelf. "You again," she said softly, more observation than tease. I sat up too quickly, rubbing the back of my neck. "Guess I'm predictable." She looked at the empty chair across from me, then down at her bag like she was considering something. Finally, she sat. Not too close. But close enough that I felt the shift. We talked about nothing, books, the weather, the terrible library coffee. But the pauses filled more than the words. Every time I glanced at her, she seemed about to say something, then didn't. I caught myself noticing details I shouldn't, the faint line where her ring used to sit, the way she tugged her sleeve over her wrist like hiding something. Half an hour passed. Too easy, too comfortable. Until a voice broke it. "Hey, man." My friend, Josh, clapped me on the shoulder, grinning. "Didn't know you studied here." His eyes flicked toward her, curious, lingering just long enough. I stiffened. "Yeah, just, trying to focus." Josh laughed. "Sure. I'll catch you later." He left, but the space he carved stayed. She exhaled quietly, eyes on her book but not reading. "He was your age?" "Yeah. We, grew up together." Her lips pressed thin, not judgment exactly, something else. Restraint. I wanted to tell her it didn't matter, that he wouldn't think anything. But even I knew that wasn't true. The silence between us turned heavier, thick enough to feel. She shut her book slowly, fingers resting on the cover, unmoving. "This is unwise," she murmured finally. Barely above a whisper. I didn't answer. Couldn't. My hand had curled tight around my pen, knuckles pale. She looked at me then, really looked. And for a second, all the careful distance in her expression cracked. I thought she might leave, stand up, vanish before I could say anything. But she stayed. The library around us blurred, the faint hum of fluorescent lights, the shifting footsteps of strangers. I leaned a little closer without meaning to. She didn't pull back. Her hand twitched, almost reaching across the table, then stopped midway, retreating to the safety of her lap. "Don't," she started, then shook her head, eyes closing for the briefest moment. "Forget it." My throat tightened. Words pressed hard at the back of my mouth, desperate, but none made it past my lips. The space between us seemed impossibly small. My pulse raced. One more inch, and I'd know the taste of her. Instead, we sat frozen there, breathing the same air, drowning in the same silence, until someone coughed loudly in the next aisle. The spell broke. She pushed back her chair, standing too quickly. "I should go." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she zipped her bag. And when she walked away this time, she didn't look back. We ended up walking together one evening, not planned, just chance. She left the coffee shop at the same time I did, our steps falling into rhythm on the cracked sidewalk. The air smelled like rain that hadn't yet arrived. At first, it was the usual, comments about the chill, the streetlights that never seemed to work. But then the conversation thinned, and we just listened to the sound of our shoes on the pavement. Halfway down the block, she stopped at a bench under a flickering lamp. "Mind if we sit?" I nodded, though my chest was tight. She folded her arms, staring out at nothing. For a long moment, she said nothing at all. Then, almost like it slipped out, she whispered, "Do you know what it feels like to be watched by your own life? Like it keeps reminding you what you should have been?" I hesitated. "Sometimes. Yeah." Her laugh was small, bitter. "You're too young to know that." She rubbed her palms together, as if the night had seeped into her skin. I wanted to tell her she was wrong. That loneliness didn't wait for age. That mine was just quieter, hidden in unsent messages and the way I always left lights on at night so the apartment wouldn't feel so hollow. Instead I said, "I remember once, in your class, you told us that everyone has one thing they're afraid of saying out loud. And that if we ever did, it would change everything." She looked at me then, sharp, startled almost. "I don't remember saying that." "I do," I replied softly. The silence that followed felt like a held breath. Her eyes flicked down to my hands again, restless, clenching and unclenching. She leaned back against the bench. "You make this harder than it should be." "What do you mean?" My voice cracked, betraying me. Her jaw tightened. "I'm not supposed to sit here with you." "Not supposed to want," she stopped herself, pressing her lips together, shaking her head. I swallowed hard. The words hung between us, unfinished but alive. "I'm not," I started, but my throat closed up. What was I going to say? "I'm not a kid anymore. I'm not afraid." All of it felt too big, too dangerous. We sat in the quiet, neither of us moving. The hum of the street lamp buzzed overhead, filling the space where our words should have gone. Finally, she exhaled sharply, as if giving something up. "I don't know how to do this," she said. Not looking at me. Not asking for an answer. Just admitting it. I turned slightly toward her. Close enough that if either of us leaned an inch more, it would end everything we'd been pretending. Her eyes flicked to mine, then down to my mouth. For one suspended second, everything tilted forward. But then a car door slammed across the street, jolting us back. She pulled away first, hands clenched in her lap. The moment had passed, but it had left something behind, raw and uncovered, impossible to ignore. She stopped showing up. For 3 nights, I lingered at the coffee shop until closing, pretending to study, refreshing my phone until the screen blurred. The empty chair by the window stayed empty, and each night I left with the sour taste of burnt coffee and something heavier I couldn't name. On the fourth day, I saw her across the street in front of the pharmacy. She was talking to someone, a man, older, gray at the temples. He touched her elbow lightly as he laughed, and though it looked casual, it tightened something sharp inside me. She noticed me. For a moment, our eyes caught across traffic. She didn't smile. Just looked, then turned back to him. That night, my phone buzzed with a new draft I never sent. Everything okay? Did I do something? I stared at it until the letters lost meaning, then deleted it. When she finally appeared again, days later, it wasn't at the coffee shop. I was leaving campus, and she was waiting outside, leaning against her car, arms folded. She looked tired. "You've been avoiding me," I said, too quickly. Her expression flickered. "Maybe I have." The words landed heavier than I expected. "Why?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Her hands worried at the sleeve of her jacket, twisting the fabric. "My son's home this week," she said finally. "He asked why I've been out so late." I blinked. The ground seemed to shift. "You never said, there's a lot I haven't said," she cut in, sharper than usual. Then softer, "I don't want him, or anyone, to misunderstand." I nodded, though my chest felt hollow. We stood in the late afternoon light, cars passing, students laughing as they walked by. None of it touched us. I wanted to ask about the man outside the pharmacy. Wanted to ask if he was her ex, or more than that. But the questions felt childish on my tongue, like prying where I didn't belong. Instead, I shoved my hands in my pockets. "So, what does this mean?" Her gaze flicked to mine, unsteady, then away. "It means I need to be careful." I almost laughed. There was nothing careful about the way we'd been circling each other. But I didn't. I just nodded again, pretending I understood. She opened her car door, paused like she might add something else. But all she said was, "Take care of yourself." And then she drove off. That night, I sat at my desk, a blank document glowing on my laptop. I typed out a line, "You make it harder than it should be," and stopped. The words looked too raw, too close to hers. My phone buzzed again. Another unsent draft, "I'll be at the coffee shop tomorrow. Will you?" I didn't send it. I just let it sit there, blinking cursor at the end, the screen casting light across an empty room. It was late when I finally saw her again. Not the coffee shop, not campus. Her front porch light was on, a soft yellow square against the dark street. I'd been walking with no real destination, my steps carrying me past her house before I even thought it through. She opened the door before I could decide whether to knock. Like she'd been expecting me. For a long second, neither of us spoke. Just the cool night air between us, my hands shoved deep into my pockets, her fingers gripping the edge of the door. "Do you want to come in?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. The kitchen was warm, faint smell of tea in the air. She set 2 mugs on the counter, filled them, slid one toward me. My hands wrapped around it just to keep from fidgeting. We didn't sit right away. She leaned against the counter, arms folded. I stayed standing, shoulders tense. The silence stretched too thin. Finally, she exhaled. "I should have told you about my son." "About, all of it?" I nodded, unsure if I should look at her or down into my tea. "You don't owe me an explanation." "Maybe not," she said softly. "But I don't want you to think I was careless." The word stung. I shook my head. "I never thought that." Her gaze held mine then, unflinching. "This isn't simple. You're young. And she trailed off, searching for the right word. "I've already made enough mistakes." I swallowed hard. My throat felt thick. "You think this is a mistake?" Her eyes softened. "I think it could be. And that terrifies me." The silence that followed was heavier than any words. I set my mug down, the faint clink too loud in the small kitchen. "I can't stop thinking about you," I admitted. The word slipped out, quieter than I meant, almost ashamed. She closed her eyes, as if the truth hurt more than denial. When she opened them again, there was no anger. Just weariness. "You make me feel seen again," she whispered. Her voice caught, like she hadn't meant to say it out loud. We stood there, both exposed in ways we couldn't take back. I didn't move closer. She didn't step away. The space between us felt like the sharpest edge. Her hand finally lowered from her folded arms, fingers brushing lightly against the back of mine on the counter. A touch so small it could have been accidental. But it wasn't. I looked at her, searching. She gave the faintest smile, sad, soft, unfinished. "Okay," she breathed. Just that one word. But it was enough to unravel the silence. It didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic kiss, no whispered promises under the rain. Instead, it unfolded the way seasons change, small, steady, almost unnoticed until one day you realized everything felt different. She still pulled back sometimes, careful. But she didn't disappear. We found a rhythm, quiet coffees, late walks, the occasional evening on her porch when the world outside seemed too far away to matter. The coffee shop became ours again. The barista stopped asking if I wanted sugar in my cup, she just slid it across the counter with a knowing smile. Mrs. Rowan, no, Emma, though I only dared use her name in private, still ordered chamomile. Sometimes, she'd push the mug toward me before taking her first sip, like testing if I'd notice. I always did. We didn't talk about labels. We didn't need to. What grew between us wasn't the kind of thing that needed announcement, it lived in the spaces we shared. Like the bench under the flickering street lamp. We sat there once in early spring, her son back at college, the night still holding its winter bite. She leaned against my shoulder without warning, and neither of us mentioned it. Just stayed like that, counting breaths, the world trimmed down to the sound of passing cars and the hum of the lamp overhead. Or the mornings she'd text me at 8:47 a.m. on the dot, no explanation, just, "Coffee?" I'd answer before the second buzz. There were moments I thought it might all break apart, that the difference in years, the echoes of old roles, the weight of her past would undo us. But then I'd see the way she straightened the napkin I'd absent-mindedly crumpled, or the way her eyes softened when I said nothing at all, and I knew, it wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing, again and again, in small, human ways. The guilt that once shadowed us eased. Not gone, but gentled into something we could live with. Like a scar, visible, but no longer painful. One evening, sitting in her kitchen, she poured tea into 2 mugs. Mine was still too sweet, hers still faintly bitter. We sat in silence, sipping, until she glanced up and caught me watching her. "What?" she asked, smiling like she already knew. "Nothing," I said. "Just. I think this feels like the ending you always told us about." Her brow furrowed. "What ending?" "The one that doesn't rush. The one that earns its last line." She laughed quietly, shaking her head, but her hand slid across the table, brushing mine. Not a grand gesture. Just a small, steady claim. And I thought then, that maybe this was all anyone ever wanted. To be seen. To be chosen. Even in the quietest ways.